There is a strange pattern in the world that most people never notice. Some individuals walk through life almost untouchable. When they make mistakes, someone powerful quietly fixes it. When enemies appear, those enemies somehow disappear. Doors open for them. Opportunities appear, and even when they fail, they fall into safety nets that ordinary people never see. But these people are not always the strongest. They are not always the richest. And they are definitely not always the smartest. What they understand is protection, not the kind you buy with money, the kind you earn from powerful people. Niccolò Machiavelli spent his life observing courts, rulers, generals, and political survivors. He watched men rise from nothing to immense influence, while others with far greater talent were destroyed overnight. And again he noticed one brutal truth. Powerful people rarely protect someone because they like them. They protect someone because it benefits them. Once you understand this, the entire game changes. Because the real secret to surviving among powerful people is not impressing them, flattering them, or trying to compete with them. It is becoming useful to them in ways they cannot easily replace. In fact, Machiavelli believed that the safest position in the world is not being powerful yourself. It is being valuable to power. This is the difference between the person who is discarded and the one who is quietly guarded. Throughout history, the people who mastered this didn't just survive. They thrived. They moved in dangerous circles surrounded by rulers, generals, billionaires, and political predators. Yet they remained protected because the powerful saw them as assets worth keeping alive. And if you look carefully, you'll see these patterns everywhere today. In politics, in corporations, in elite social circles, and even in everyday life, there are specific behaviors that subtly trigger powerful individuals to see you as someone they should keep close and defend. Machiavelli observed these behaviors centuries ago. The first trick is something that sounds simple but almost nobody truly understands. Become strategically necessary. Most people try to be likable. They try to be agreeable, polite, friendly, supportive. But Machiavelli would tell you something ruthless. Likability is fragile. Necessity is protection. If someone powerful merely enjoys your presence, you are disposable. But if removing you creates a problem for them, then keeping you becomes the safer option. Think about how rulers historically kept advisors. Many advisors were not loved. Some were feared. Some were even disliked. But they possessed something the ruler needed: knowledge, connections, skills, information, or access. As long as they held that value, eliminating them would weaken the ruler more than keeping them. And powerful people always calculate risk. This is why the smartest individuals do not simply try to please powerful figures. They try to occupy a position that is difficult to replace. A position where your presence quietly solves problems. Imagine two people working under a powerful executive. The first is friendly, supportive, and loyal. The second is the person who always knows things before others do. They understand internal dynamics. They can anticipate problems. They bring useful intelligence. If the executive must remove someone, who do you think survives longer? The one who is pleasant or the one who is strategically necessary? Machiavelli understood that rulers valued people who made their power easier to maintain, not people who simply admired them. Before we continue, if you're finding truth in this so far, I'd appreciate a like. And if you want to hear from me again, make sure you're subscribed. This leads to the second trick: protect their reputation like it is your own. Powerful people live in constant fear of one thing: reputation collapse. A ruler can survive many mistakes. But once their authority begins to look weak or foolish in the eyes of others, enemies begin circling immediately. Machiavelli knew that perception is half of power, which means anyone who helps preserve that perception becomes valuable. But there is an important detail here. You must do this subtly. Never appear like a desperate defender that looks manipulative. Instead, become someone who naturally reinforces their image. If they make a decision, frame it as strategic. If they face criticism, contextualize it. If others misunderstand their actions, clarify the logic. This does two things simultaneously. First, it strengthens their reputation. Second, it signals loyalty without looking like blind obedience. And powerful people remember those who stabilize their image. Because reputation protection is rare, Most people do the opposite. They gossip. They criticize behind closed doors. They subtly undermine authority to elevate themselves. Machiavelli warned rulers about these people constantly, which means when someone behaves differently, they stand out not as a servant, but as an ally. The third trick is where things become more psychological. Never threaten their sense of dominance. This is where many intelligent people accidentally destroy themselves. They become too impressive, too visible, too admired, and suddenly the powerful person above them begins to feel something dangerous. Competition. Machiavelli observed that rulers are often more comfortable with capable individuals who remain slightly beneath them in visible status. Once someone begins to overshadow them, even unintentionally, suspicion grows. History is filled with brilliant generals, advisors, and ministers who were eliminated not because they failed, but because they became too impressive. The ruler began to fear them, which means if you want powerful people to protect you, you must learn a delicate balance. Be valuable, but never look like a rival. Let them shine publicly. Let them take credit when appropriate. Let their authority remain unquestioned. Because the moment they feel their power shrinking in your presence, protection turns into paranoia. And paranoia around powerful people is extremely dangerous. The fourth trick Machiavelli observed is something subtle but incredibly effective. Become a source of useful information. Powerful people are constantly trying to see the future. Who is loyal? Who is plotting? What threats are forming? What opportunities are emerging? And the truth is, they rarely see the full picture themselves. They rely on networks of information, advisors, observers, messengers, people who understand dynamics others miss. If you become someone who quietly provides valuable insights about situations, patterns, or potential risks, your value increases dramatically. But again, this must be done carefully. Never appear like a gossip. Never appear like a spy. Instead, present information as perspective, as awareness, as someone who simply notices things others overlook. Over time, powerful people begin to see you as someone who helps them navigate complexity. And once someone becomes part of a powerful person's awareness network, they become harder to remove because losing that source of insight creates blindness. Machiavelli believed rulers feared blindness more than almost anything. This brings us to the fifth trick, and it may be the most counterintuitive of them all. Never ask powerful people for protection. Let them decide to give it. Most people approach powerful individuals with requests. Help me, support me, defend me. And the moment you do that, you change the dynamic. Now you look dependent, needy, weak. Machiavelli understood that powerful people prefer to protect individuals who appear strong enough to survive without begging because those individuals feel like investments, not burdens. So instead of asking for protection, focus on becoming valuable. Focus on solving problems. Focus on strengthening their position. Eventually, something interesting happens. When someone threatens you, the powerful person may intervene without you even asking. Not because they are being generous, but because removing you would damage something useful to them. And this is the real secret Machiavelli discovered. Protection from powerful people rarely comes from kindness. It comes from calculation. If your existence strengthens their power, then your safety becomes strategically valuable. Out of the 5 tricks we've covered so far, which one do you mess up the most? Let me know down below. But don't get too comfortable because trick 7 is the one that destroys most people overnight. There's another layer to this that most people never realize. Because even if you become useful, even if you become necessary, even if you avoid threatening their dominance, there is still one mistake that can instantly destroy everything. A mistake that has caused trusted advisors, loyal generals, and influential insiders to lose protection overnight. And Machiavelli warned about it with almost eerie precision. Because once this mistake happens, the powerful person who once protected you may suddenly become the very person you need protection from. And understanding why this happens may be the most important lesson of all. That mistake is becoming predictable in your loyalty. At first, that sounds absurd. Wouldn't a powerful person want complete loyalty? Wouldn't they want someone who is always obedient, always available, always devoted? On the surface, yes. But Machiavelli understood something darker about human nature, especially in those who possess authority. When your loyalty becomes too obvious, too automatic, too guaranteed, your value begins to decline. Why? Because what is guaranteed is rarely respected. Powerful people may enjoy obedience, but they do not truly prize what they no longer have to secure. The moment they believe you are permanently attached, permanently dependent, permanently theirs, no matter how they treat you, they stop seeing you as an asset they must preserve and start seeing you as property they can risk. And property is used. Assets are protected. This is a brutal distinction, but it explains so much about how power actually operates. Machiavelli saw it in courts where trusted servants were overworked, discarded, humiliated, and sacrificed, while more strategically positioned figures retained influence for years. The difference was not morality, it was leverage. The protected person never allowed their loyalty to become cheap. They were consistent, yes, reliable, yes, valuable, absolutely, but they never radiated helpless attachment. They never communicated, even silently, that they had nowhere else to go. Because the moment a powerful person senses you have no alternatives, their respect begins to erode. And where respect erodes, protection weakens. This is why the sixth trick is to remain loyal without becoming captive. Stay useful, stay composed, stay aligned, but never give the impression that your identity, survival, or future depends entirely on one powerful person's favor. That kind of dependence is intoxicating to them for a moment and then boring. And once it becomes boring, you become vulnerable. A person who can stand on their own yet chooses alignment appears strong. A person who clings appears weak. Power respects strength even when it benefits from devotion. Remember that the seventh trick is even more dangerous because it deals with something powerful people almost never forgive. Public embarrassment. You can make many mistakes around influential people and still survive. You can be late, you can be wrong, you can fail privately, but humiliating them in front of others, even accidentally, creates a wound that often outlives life's logic. Machiavelli understood that rulers do not simply defend territory or wealth, they defend image, and nothing threatens image like being made to look foolish, uninformed, weak, or outmaneuvered in public. This is why a powerful person may forgive a private disagreement, but never forgive a public contradiction. The content of the disagreement often matters less than the audience, because once others witness a crack in authority, it gives them permission to test more boundaries. It suggests the ruler can be challenged and in any power structure that is dangerous. So if you want powerful people to protect you, learn the art of preserving their dignity, especially when they are wrong. This does not mean becoming dishonest. It means understanding timing. Correct them in private if you must. Advise them quietly. Redirect gently. Ask questions that lead them toward a better decision without forcing them into visible retreat. The foolish person tries to prove intelligence by exposing flaws in public. The wise person protects influence by preserving hierarchy in public and shaping outcomes in private. Machiavelli would have considered this simple political survival because the goal is not to win a moment. The goal is to remain protected for years, and this becomes even more important when powerful people are under pressure. Pressure makes them more insecure, more reactive, more suspicious. What they might normally ignore, they suddenly interpret as betrayal. A joke at the wrong time, a correction in the wrong room, a visible hesitation when they expect confidence. All of it can register as disrespect, and disrespect is remembered, especially by those who already live in fear of losing control. Now here is where the game becomes even more subtle. The eighth trick is to become associated with their victories. Powerful people protect what reinforces their success. This is one of the deepest principles in Machiavelli's worldview. Human beings are drawn toward those they associate with gain, advantage, and upward movement. But the powerful are even more sensitive to this because they are constantly measuring who contributes to their rise and who merely feeds on it. If your presence is linked to good outcomes, your value increases far beyond your formal role. Maybe you are the one who helped refine a risky idea before it succeeded. Maybe you are the one who saw the weakness in a rival strategy early. Maybe you are the one who handled a sensitive situation before it exploded. Maybe you are simply the one whose presence coincides with smoother operations, stronger messaging, better decisions, more stable alliances. The exact form doesn't matter as much as the pattern. You want the powerful person to begin feeling almost subconsciously that things tend to go better when you are around. This is what creates protective instinct, because now losing you does not just mean losing a person. It feels like losing momentum. And powerful people are addicted to momentum. They may not always say it. They may not even fully realize it, but they notice who tends to be nearby when they win. History shows this constantly. Certain advisors remained close to kings, not because they were noble or lovable, but because the king's fortunes improved. In their orbit, the king began to treat them almost like lucky instruments of power, and once someone is psychologically connected to your victories, abandoning them feels riskier. Machiavelli knew that rulers are often superstitious in this way. Even when they pretend to be rational, they notice patterns. They protect symbols of success. This means your real task is not just to be competent, it is to become mentally associated with favorable outcomes. Not by boasting, not by demanding recognition, but by consistently contributing to victories in a way that becomes impossible to ignore. And that requires something most people fail to develop: emotional discipline. Because nothing destroys protective instincts faster than becoming emotionally expensive. Powerful people tolerate many things, but they hate chaos that drains them. If your usefulness comes bundled with constant drama, insecurity, resentment, emotional volatility, or personal complications, your strategic value starts to decay. Machiavelli admired effectiveness. He respected people who could operate inside unstable environments without becoming unstable themselves. To powerful people, a calm and reliable presence is rare. Most individuals bring emotions into everything. They react impulsively. They become offended. They demand reassurance. They force others to manage their moods. But the person who remains measured, controlled, and clear under pressure becomes deeply valuable because they lower friction. And lowering friction is a hidden form of power. Think about what influential people deal with every day. Competition, manipulation, flattery, threats, uncertainty, duplicity, constant demands. Most of the people around them are either trying to take something, prove something, or emotionally pull something out of them. Now imagine the contrast of a person who is sharp, calm, helpful, discreet, and difficult to rattle. That person becomes psychologically restful, and what is restful in a dangerous world becomes precious. Machiavelli would have understood this immediately. In volatile courts, the individual who could be trusted not to panic, not to complain unnecessarily, not to create scenes, and not to act recklessly was often worth more than someone technically more gifted. Because power is not sustained by brilliance alone. It is sustained by stability, which leads to the ninth trick. Make your loyalty expensive to lose. This is the final shift. Not cheap loyalty, not emotional loyalty, expensive loyalty. Machiavelli's world was full of betrayals, sudden reversals, and collapsing alliances. He knew that promises meant little unless losing the relationship carried a real cost. So, if you want powerful people to protect you, your departure, destruction, or defection must feel costly. That cost can take many forms. You may possess institutional memory they cannot replace quickly. You may understand sensitive dynamics others do not. You may carry trust with key people in their network. You may be one of the few who can execute without supervision. You may know how to solve specific problems they repeatedly face. You may simply be one of the very few around them whose motives are controlled, whose competence is proven, and whose discretion is reliable. When all of that becomes true, something important happens. The powerful person stops seeing you as interchangeable. And once that happens, the instinct to protect you becomes much stronger, because now harming you, losing you, or allowing others to destroy you creates real strategic damage. That is when you move from useful to guarded. But here is the deeper point Machiavelli would force you to confront. None of this is sentimental. That is what makes it hard for most people to accept. We want to believe protection comes from affection, from kindness, from loyalty alone, from being a good person. Sometimes it does. But in the world Machiavelli studied, and in the world we still live in now, durable protection usually comes from utility fused with perception. You are protected when power sees your survival as beneficial. You are guarded when your presence strengthens position, reputation, momentum, or control. And once you truly understand this, you stop acting like everyone else. You stop chasing approval in childish ways. You stop performing loyalty as theater. You stop trying to be adored. Instead, you begin building something far more serious. A place in the architecture of another person's power. Not beneath them in weakness, not against them in rivalry, but inside their system in such a way that removing you becomes a mistake. That is the real game, and almost nobody plays it consciously. They either flatter too much and become pathetic, or they shine too brightly and become threatening, or they ask for too much and become burdens, or they reveal too much ambition and become suspects. Machiavelli's genius was seeing that survival near power requires precision. You must be close but not suffocating, valuable but not menacing, loyal but not captive, visible but never overshadowing, useful but never noisy about it. And once you master that balance, something extraordinary begins to happen. You no longer need to beg for safety. Safety begins to gather around you naturally because the people with influence begin to sense that your existence serves their world more than your absence ever could. And that is when doors quietly open. Warnings reach you early. Enemies hesitate. Mistakes get forgiven. Your name is defended when you are not in the room. And opportunities find you before you have to chase them. Not because the world suddenly became fair, but because you finally understood one of its oldest and cruelest truths. In a world ruled by power, the safest person is rarely the most innocent, the most honest, or even the most talented. It is the person power has decided is worth keeping alive.